Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Christian's Voice, a podcast for relevant topics and intelligent conversations. We are living in historical times. Events in the Middle East, especially Israel, happen at the speed of light, and trying to make sense of them all can be quite challenging. For which reason, I have invited Ofir Halvry to join us on this program this evening for a discussion about recent events in the Middle East and especially in Israel. Of course, we are talking here about the conflict between Hamas and Israel, unleashed by Hamas, not Israel, as well as the events in Gaza, where Palestinians have become victims of Hamas's genocidal actions against Israel. We are honored to have him as a guest on our podcast. And I would like to mention that Ofir is with the Herzl Institute in Jerusalem, a very prestigious think tank. Ofir, good evening to you in Jerusalem, and thank you very much for having accepted our invitation here on Christian's Voice to help us understand the events of the last 2 years, and especially the events of the last 2 or 3 weeks or so, which are unfolding really sort of at the speed of light. So let's start by you, please, telling us a little bit about yourself as a person, as a father, family man, and your association with the Herzl Institute.
So thank you, Peter, very much for having me here, and I'm happy to hear in your program. And if I start to talk about myself, it will take 1 hour, so I will be brief. I was actually born in Switzerland, and like many other Jews, I made Aliyah, which is like immigration back to Israel, when I was a kid, and so I've been living since then in Israel. I am by training a historian of political thought, so I write articles and books and essays about political ideas. And also, I am head at the Herzl Institute, which I co-founded with my friend Yoav Chazoni. I'm heading a project about, I would say, national strategy, strategic issues having to do with Israel, the Middle East, and so on. And so I also write essays and attend conferences having to do with strategy, regional issues. So I recently published an essay dealing with what I can describe as the failure of the Arab state, meaning that Arab states all over the Middle East are facing an internal collapse, having nothing to do with Israel or anything like that. It's an internal development of their political structure, if you want. So things like that. I have 2 kids. I am divorced, but I hope maybe to marry again. Who knows? And I live in a place called Givatayim, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, which is also not very distant from Jerusalem, because people hearing the news tend to think that Israel is a very large place because we are a lot in the news, but actually Israel is very, very small. It's about the size of New Jersey, and even that, half of it is desert. So actually the distance between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem is less than 60 kilometers. So the whole country is very small. The population is very condensed in a few areas. And that means that we are, on the one hand, a very close and cohesive society. Unfortunately, it also means that if someone sends missiles, it hits a lot of people. But what can we do?
Yeah, wonderful. We love Israel, and just about everybody I know in the Christian circles that I mingle with, everybody just loves Israel to death, and we are really honored to have you with us here tonight. While you are talking about the essay that you wrote recently, it dawned on me maybe we ought to start by you telling us briefly, over 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, the gist of your essay on the failure of the Arab state, because that's a topic by itself at some point. But you're right about the failure of the Arab state. There's always hope in the United States, hope in Europe, hope that we are going to change governments in Tunisia, in Iran, in Iraq, and so on and so forth. And after 5, 10 years, you happen to be right in the same spot from where you started 10, 15 years ago. So let's see if you can focus on this really interesting idea that you brought up, and then we'll get into the
Yes.
topics for tonight.
First of all, this is also connected to the topics we'll discuss, of course. Not directly, but in a more general way. So we are already in a sense on the topic. So basically, my argument is I'm trying to look at why is it that unlike other areas of the world, where if you look at Africa, East Asia, Central Asia, so on. So usually you find some countries are, let's say, similar in religion or culture or background, and some of them are more successful, some less. You can bring a very clear example is Korea. You have North Korea, South Korea, the same people, the same tradition, and so on. But because of communism, of course, one society is very different. So all over the world, in most cases, in Africa, in Asia, you will find some countries are doing better, some worse. But one thing that really jumps to the eye is that basically you can say that all Arab states, without exception, have failed to become what we recognize as a modern state. So I'm not saying successful. I'm not saying Denmark. But even if you say that a state like, let's say, Malaysia, like Belize, like, I don't know, Panama, a normal state, nothing special. You don't have any of the Arab countries that fit that description. And I'm trying to explain why is it. So basically, you have the Arab countries are the countries that have a majority of people who speak Arabic or some dialect of Arabic. So there are 18 such countries, and all these countries are 10 of them are republics, and 8 are monarchies or emirates or some kind. So out of the republics, which you would expect would be the more modern and evolved and more looking like countries in Europe or Asia, right? You find that basically 7 of them are absolutely failed states. What I mean by failed state, I mean that the official government doesn't control even 50% of the territory of the state. So Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, they are all failed states. So the government cannot even control the majority of the country. In the other 3, which are Egypt, Tunisia, and Algeria, these 3 republics, even they went through very violent upheavals recently. And in all cases, they are a very restricted dictatorship based basically on the army and some kind of clan. And they are, let's say, one heartbeat away from total chaos, because they are basically there isn't something that we can recognize in, let's say, Portugal or Romania or Hungary as a civil society. So parties and views and, let's say, independent trade unions, religious organizations, independent newspapers, all the things that you think about when you say, okay, this is a free country, more or less. In all Arab countries, this doesn't exist. Even in the 3 republics that are holding together, basically, no one can tell you for sure that in 1 year they will not be also in total chaos. The army is basically holding it together. Now, these are the republics. You might say that in the case of the monarchies, the situation is better because all of them are more or less functioning as states. So there is not chaos. But in fact, all the Arab monarchies are kind of not modern states. They are governed by, they are not monarchies, let's say, like Denmark or Britain, where the king is symbolic, right? They are actual monarchies in the sense of the Middle Ages. So the king is the personal owner of the country. In some cases, the name of the country, so Saudi Arabia is named Saudi Arabia because the Saudi royal family. And the same with Jordan, which is officially the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. So the country is seen as the property of the ruling family, and so the king can dismiss the government, make another government. Of course, there are no elections really to a parliament. There is no independent judiciary. There is no security for property. Meaning, if the king decides that he doesn't like you, even if you have $1 billion, he can take them in one day and put you in jail. There's nothing. So basically, all these countries are not modern countries as we see them. They are ruled by usually a clan, the tribal clan of the king, who holds it together by an alliance with other clans. Usually, he marries, let's say, the king of Saudi Arabia, the man who created Saudi Arabia. He married like 50 women. He had hundreds of kids, and so he married into all the clans. And so the other kings do the same. They marry into various clans, and also they have an army which is loyal only to them, not to the country. So this is so extreme that in the smaller countries like Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, there is no national army. So in Qatar, all the Air Force pilots are Pakistani. Why? One, it's a very small population. In Qatar, it's like 3 million people, but only about 10% of them are Qataris. 90% are foreign workers that have no rights, of course. They are not immigrants in the sense they don't get citizenship or rights. There are people from Philippines, India, Pakistan, whatever. They work there, but they have no status. So these 300,000 people, Qataris, control Qatar, and they are not enough to have an army, actually. So the most of the army are mercenaries, and the same thing in the United Arab Emirates, even in Saudi Arabia. The most of the army units are mercenaries of one kind or another, and the only real strong units in Saudi Arabia are the royal guard that are from the royal clan, and so you get the idea. This is not. This looks like some princedom in Central Europe in the 1550 or something like that. It doesn't look like a modern state that we think about, right? With all so it has the outside appearance of a state because there is a court, maybe there is a parliament, maybe there is a television and all that. But in actual, it's like a theme park. It's like a Disneyland. Right, you go to Disneyland and you see the castle, but it's not a real castle. It's like made of styrofoam. So this is the same. These countries, the modern elements are styrofoam, and the essence is there is no civil society. There is no. I'm not talking about freedom, but even a country like China, where there is no political freedom, economically at least, the government is really advancing the situation of the population because of its interest. But objectively, Chinese today are richer than 20 years ago. But in all these Arab countries, that's not the case. It's the ruling family has a lot of money. They give some money to the regular people, and that's it. And there is no building. I always give this example. Even very poor countries today can manufacture stuff, right? So, of course, China, but even if you look at my shirt, if I look at where it's made of, I see it's made sometime in Indonesia or Vietnam or Bangladesh, right? So they produce it, but you don't have any shirt made in Iraq, made in Egypt, made in Nigeria. Why is it? It's because none of these countries actually produce anything for external consumption except petrol. So it's all a gigantic team,
right?
Exactly. So basically, we are at a situation where all the Arab countries, in fact, are collapsing. All the republics are because no one believes in the country. It's collapsing into clans, and either people don't believe in if you don't believe in the state, so you either believe in a warlord or your own, let's say, clan or your religious group that will defend you. You do not believe in the institution of the state. And this is the case with so many countries in the Middle East.
Yeah,
And
and I
so
think
we
that's going to be. I think that's going to be reflected in our conversation about Gaza a couple of minutes down the road, because there,
exactly.
in spite of the so-called peace, there is already an explosion and a lot of fighting, infighting between Hamas and other groups, and we'll touch on that topic as well. But let's go back a little bit
But
to 2 years
just one
ago.
sentence here.
Go ahead.
Just one sentence. You are correct. But even before we get to Gaza, remember that the Palestinian Authority, which is supposed to govern Gaza and the West Bank, is also a failed state in the sense that the Palestinian Authority was the attempt of the Palestinians to say we can have a country. So almost 30 years ago, they established the Palestinian Authority, and not only they haven't succeeded, but they are in the same situation as Yemen or Sudan. So even now, Gaza and the West Bank are governed by two governments. That's before we get even to Hamas. Even before that, you
That's
have
right.
basically this sort of state is even failed before it's a state.
Right. Okay, let's talk about Hamas. Of course, we did a lot about Hamas and what happened 2 years ago on October the 7th, 2023. The consensus, or at least the appearance, the impression that people in Europe and in the United States have had, and to this point, many of them do have or hold, is that Hamas really engaged in an action that really took Israel by surprise. And many people were saying, wasn't this a sign of Israeli intelligence failure? Why was it that nobody could predict this event, that nobody could anticipate this event? Why it happened like a lightning strike of that intensity, and it was so lethal?
So I would say that the intelligence failure was technical, but it wasn't the real failure because you can always have in a surprise attack can happen anywhere. So sometimes you can find it out before someone you can't, but the usual strategy of an army would be to be ready to confront even a surprise attack. So the point is not that they surprised on that day, but that the Israeli army and the Israeli strategic thinking wasn't ready for the scale of the attack. And I want to explain why was it. So
Yes, go
in
ahead.
Israel, in Israel they call it the conception, meaning sometimes you want things to be a way, and you start to believe that the way that you want it to be is also the way it is. The most famous example is, of course, the appeasement policies before the Second World War, where
Right.
you're saying, wait a minute, doesn't Chamberlain and don't the French know who Hitler is? How come they believed him after Austria about Czechoslovakia and so on and so forth? How come it took them so long to believe it? They weren't stupid. It's not that Chamberlain was a stupid person. It's simply that he wanted so much to believe one thing that all the information coming on the other side, he like shut it up or saying, yeah, but that's technical. Really, he could not see the reasons for the other side doing something that seems so irrational. And the same I have to say is with the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Ukraine,
So I
sure.
mean, to some people it was obvious that it will happen, but so many in the West, in Europe, and in America said no because it's not rational. Why would Putin go all out war like this? So
All the way in.
the question was, in these cases wasn't did the intelligence know or didn't know about this attack, but how come the whole system thought that it's not feasible or not likely? So in Israel, I would say there was this way of thinking that Israel succeeded in creating a kind of balance of how do you call it, kind of balance of deterrence with Hamas. Basically, sometimes Hamas would make an attack, then Israel would like a small attack, right?
Retaliate. Right.
Exactly. So the Israeli political and military system believed that Hamas attacking Israel directly on a large front is suicidal, and it's irrational. So basically, all the units were preparing for small attacks. At most, three groups of 15 terrorists attacking some kibbutz or some little town. That was the worst case scenario, because in the way of thinking at that time, the Hamas was treated as a rational player. So like a country, if you think, wait a minute, would Jordan tomorrow attack Israel? It's unlikely because the cost would be. But the point is that Hamas and all these proxy, even Hezbollah and so on, they are not really rational players for two reasons. One, their own ideology. If you believe that suicide terrorists are legitimate, so in a way you also believe that suicide attacks are not on a small scale but a very large scale are true. So this is one element of this. The second element was that in some ways at least Hamas wasn't attacking on its own, but it was part of a whole ring of fire, let's call it, of proxies of Iran. Iran was
Surrounding Israel.
exactly. So the idea, Hamas thought that its attack we will have a very large cost, but they expected that one, Judea and Samaria, the population there in the West Bank, also Hezbollah, also Iran, there will be like a kind of domino effect where Israel will be attacked from all these directions. That was what they thought would happen. Because of, I would say, secrecy considerations, they didn't actually notify the Hezbollah and Iran about the actual date. And they attacked without really coordinating with Iran and Hezbollah the attack. So on the day of the attack, if Hezbollah would have been ready and attacked Israel, the price for Israel would have been many times higher, because Hezbollah is a far more trained force than Hamas.
You're talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Exactly, attacking from the north. While if on the same day or in the day later, right, when Hamas attacked in the south, Hezbollah attacked from the north, and Iran sent all these missiles, right? So a coordinated attack that would have been terrible for Israel.
Yes.
My certainty is they would have won, but there would have been not 1,000 dead, but maybe 5,000 or 10,000 dead. Most of them civilians, of course, because these attacks are not, for the most part, they are not on army units. They are on towns so on. And the same with the missiles. The Iranian missiles are not targeted at army bases. They're targeted at the center of population. So if we had about 1,200 dead on the Hamas attack on October 7th, the vast majority of them civilians. If it would have been a concerted attack, we could have expect 5 or 10 times more dead, right? So a terrible hit. And one of the reasons the Israeli army also thought that Hamas wouldn't attack, because they didn't see any preparations in Iran. We had very good. The Mossad is very good at information in Iran, and so we knew what was going on in Hezbollah and Iran, and there was no sign that we were ready for that attack, and we were correct on that, because they were as surprised as Israel of the attack. And indeed, what happened after, Hezbollah attacked Israel, but in a rather, I would say, perfunctory way, meaning there was no plan. It wasn't the case that all the units of Hezbollah were ready to attack. So until it organized and so on, Israel was already prepared, and it couldn't be a surprise in the north. And the same with Iran, and the same with other proxies, like they tried to send some missiles from Iraq, and of course the Houthis in Yemen. But all was exactly. But all that was irrelevant already, because the concerted attack didn't happen. So in fact, what happened is each of them was dealt by Israel separately. So the actual, I would say, the actual benefit for Iran of having the Ring of Fire was destroyed, because having the Ring of Fire each of them is weaker than Israel, but the whole point was to have them all attack at the same moment, or in the same day, or the same 2 days. But in fact, when they didn't attack all on the same day, Israel could deal with each of them separately. So it could fight Hezbollah separately, it could fight Iran separately, it could hit the Houthis separately. So in fact, this is what transpired, and what Iran basically built for more than 20 years. This ring of fire now is in ruins, basically, because of
Yeah, and
this.
then thank God also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on in the show. Thank God also there was a change in the White House, and then American power also I think helped quite a bit, at least in Iran, and then also in Yemen. Let's go back to Hamas because
I'll go one step further. One step
go
further.
ahead.
I think that the Hamas believed that if the war will drag on, even in Gaza only, the pressure on Israel will build in Europe and America, and eventually Israel will be made to stop the war against them by European and by the Biden government and or Kamala Harris later. So
Right.
they were, I mean, for them, the election of Trump was a disaster because
That's right.
it destroyed all their expectations.
Right, I agree with you. I think that was the design, that was the intent, that was the strategy. But let's go back to Hamas because everybody talked about Hamas for the last 2 years, and of course, the media was talking about Hamas. But one thing that was, in my opinion, plainly missing from this conversation about the Gaza situation was Hamas as an organization. It's a terroristic organization. I have read some of its declarations and programs of action, and they're fairly explicit that it aims to wipe off the face of the earth the state of Israel. So please take the time that you need and tell us about Hamas, its origins, what it stands for, what its ideology is, and what its aims are.
So we have to start by understanding that Hamas is a branch of an ideology and organization called the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was created in Egypt about 100 years ago, and
Right?
its basic ideology, right, is that uh, the current decline of the Arab and Muslim world at that time, but also today, the same view, the fact that the Arabs are not the number one power in the world, is due to the fact that Western civilization is basically a kind of a modern version of the Crusades, and it's enervating, it's weakening the Arab from the inside. So their own ideology is basically that all the Arab societies are corrupt, which in this they are correct, and so their view is they have to cleanse these Arab societies and then fight against this what they say as the modern crusade, which means all of Western values that we understand as Western values. So their objection to Israel is not as Israel. Of course, they're against Israel, but for them, Israel, the point is that Israel is a kind of vanguard for the West, for American values, for freedom, for the Jewish
Democracy.
and Christian values, all this set of ideas that we see as beneficial to all people, and many countries around the world, like Japan and South Korea and India, whatever, even right have adopted these Western values of an open society and a free market and so on, and have thrived with it
Yes,
for
very
the
much so.
for the Muslim Brotherhood, this is evil. So they are
Yes,
basically fighting it, and they are their view is of a worldwide struggle. So they are fighting this struggle in the Arab countries, but also in the West. So they are opening up organizations in Europe, even in the US,
that's
and
right.
basically radicalizing the Muslims in those countries. So what I mean is, people think that the Muslim Brotherhood is a kind of primitive, um, philosophy medieval or something like that, but it's not at all. It's a kind of modern philosophy that, I mean, if you go to some Egyptian or Iraqi farmer in his farm, he's taking off his farm. He doesn't, in his head, he's not fighting against Israel or the Crusaders or Europe. It's not in his. But these, so the Muslim Brotherhood actually goes to universities in the Middle East, but also in Europe, also in America, and takes young men and women and radicalize them in believing that their mission is to destroy all Western values. So you have today groups like that in America, and I hope that U.S. Declares and also acts against the Muslim Brotherhood as an terrorist organization. Now, I want to just point out the Muslim Brotherhood is an organization, it is an ideology, but in many cases, it doesn't call itself everywhere the Muslim Brotherhood. So in the case of Gaza, it calls itself Hamas. In other places, so in the US, there could be an organization that is like a front for the Muslim Brotherhood, but it's called the Organization for Muslim Humanitarian Assistance. But in fact, it's a front organization for the Muslim Brotherhood. So the point is not only saying, okay, we ban the Muslim Brotherhood, but also there should be an effort to identify these organizations and to close them down if you don't want basically a replay of what is going on in Gaza in tomorrow in France or Romania or the UK or the US, because that is the real ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, in Gaza, the Muslim Brotherhood, if you want, chapter in Gaza called the Hamas is an organization that has in its statute basically, again, it is against any Western values or interference in the Middle East, and it sees Israel as illegitimate. Now,
For that reason.
The interesting thing is that the Muslim Brotherhood is an anti-nationalist organization, meaning it's not really a Palestinian national organization. It doesn't believe in nation. It believes in an Islamic empire. So it doesn't really believe that the Egyptian and Syrian and Palestinian states are legitimate. They are only a tool. Eventually, it doesn't have to have. Its goal is not to have, let's say, 23 Muslim Brotherhood countries, but actually one gigantic empire. This is their goal. They don't believe in all these states, but for tactical reasons, they have embraced the Palestinian so-called cause. Now, of course, their goal is not having a Palestinian state in the Gaza Strip and in Judea and Samaria. Their goal is for the elimination in Israel, and Jews, like Christians, in their view, that will stay in Muslim countries, they can only stay as second-class citizens, paying a special tax and having many restrictions and so on and so forth. Like basically, they want to restore something like 7th or 8th century Muslim laws, right? Some kind of something like that. And this ideology is basically founded on something that is basically a view of basically being so right that there are no limits to what you can do about it. So most countries, even very evil countries, try at least outwardly to say, yes, we are keeping with the Geneva Conventions and we are keeping with the laws of war and so on and so forth. I mean, let's say Russia, not a very nice country, but still, when it kidnaps civilians, it doesn't say it does it secretly, because it's not a good look to, let's say that tomorrow Russia would kidnap 250 Polish civilians. It wouldn't advise it. It wouldn't say, yes, we did, we are proud we did it. They would hide it because it's not a good thing as seen in the world right? The same with North Korea. In the case of Hamas, they flaunt totally these rules. So they have no problem in kidnapping children, I mean, even small children, 5, 10 years old, women, elderly, people with cancer,
Disabilities, right?
some of them, right? So this is something that, if you can think of it, even the worst countries in the world try to hide those things when they did it. But Hamas, in fact, doesn't hide it. They show these people, right? So it's the same kind of ideology. That's another branch, but like ISIS, right? It did those beheadings of civilians, right? It used to do that a few years ago. And for us in the West, we look at it and we say, who even if you kill someone, why show it on TV? If you kidnap a kid 10 years old, why do you show it? Why do you think that it will help you? So it has two reasons for that. One is that in essence, it doesn't fit our morality or modern morality, but it fits the a kind of moral view of Islam in the 7th century, since they want to go back to the values of Muhammad, if you want, for which it was clearly okay to have slaves and to kill children. That was fine. There was no moral qualm about it. So for them, this is one part, but also because essentially they are not a state, they are a terrorist organization. Although they look like a state, they are not a state, in fact. So their goal is really to terrorize their own population, and the enemy is saying, look how brutal we are. You should fear us. This is why
Yeah,
they do all these terrible things.
yeah. Ofir, one thing that has not really been played out that much in the media, and we need someone to shed some light on this issue is who has financed Hamas? Who has provided the resources? Because it seems to us that, in a sense, Gaza is surrounded by Israel, by the security forces of Israel. How do weapons end up in the hands of these terrorists? How do money and resources, material resources, end up or have ended up in the hands of Hamas over the last, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years? Where 2 years ago Hamas popped up out of nowhere with such force, lethal force against one of the most brave armies in the world. Who's financing them?
So on some level, they are financed by countries like Iran and Qatar. However, on some other level, they were also financed, and maybe they will be in the future, by the European Union and by the US and even by Israel. And why that is the case? Because in fact, the big problem is that Hamas is a terrorist organization that controls a population of almost 2 million people. So always the what you could do to a terrorist organization, right? If Hamas was a few hundred people in the let's say in some mountain, you could cordon them off and say we will let them starve. But it's impossible for a country like Israel or the West or whatever to say, yeah, I will let 2 million people starve. We can maybe give them less food and but things like that. But you cannot really say, okay, they will have to suffer 2 million. So there is also always the use by Hamas of the need to give aid to the population. So during the last 20 years, on one level, there was aid coming from Israel, from the US, from the UN, from many countries in the European Union, giving money to Hamas. Of course, not to Hamas. They gave money for humanitarian causes, for rebuilding infrastructure, for hospitals, and so on. But the point is that since Hamas controls the Gaza Strip, every dollar that gets in gets used to create. So, for example, I can send you that. You can show it maybe in one of the your next programs. The Hamas terrorists, they have like a film where they show how they make homemade missiles. How do they throw them? They need like something to throw the missile, like a tube. So where do they
Right.
find those tubes? They dig up the water tubes that were paid by Israel and America and the water pipes for the population in Gaza. So they go and dig them up, right? This is a civilian project. So after these pipes have been in, they dig them up, and they use the pipes to make launchers for missiles. Or let's say that they get money to build a hospital. So above a hospital is built, underneath there are bunkers and tunnels for the terrorists. So you understand the problem is that what of every dollar that gets into Gaza Strip, half of the money gets directed into terrorist enterprises. So if during the 20 years, basically billions of dollars have been given by the international community to help the Gaza population. So people don't understand that even today, the water and electricity to Gaza is supplied by Israel. Israel, even now, is supplying. Why? Because without water and electricity, the people would die, right?
Sure.
So we and everyone, not only Israel, but Israel, of course, more than others, we are in a conundrum of saying, look, we could say tomorrow, no more water or electricity from Israel, zero. Then all the world would say, what do you mean? People are dying. And we could say it's not our problem. But in fact, we don't want 100,000 children to be dead. So in fact, we are supplying these and other. Now, I'll give you one example. Now that Gaza is destroyed, there will be a plan to rebuild it. Roads, hospitals, schools, houses. Now, if Israel doesn't make sure that Hamas doesn't rule Gaza anymore, basically we will see a replay of what happened before. Hamas, the cement will get in to rebuild an hospital, and part of the cement will go down to build new tunnels for terror, and so on and so forth. Right? So basically, the money, unfortunately, is coming from us, from you and I, because all the money that people with good intentions, the American government, the EU, the UN, the Red Cross is giving to Gaza is going to the hands of Hamas. So until there is a clear system for denying Hamas getting any of that money, basically some other organization that governs the Gaza Strip, we have to assume that every dollar and every piece of iron and everything that gets into Gaza might end up in the hands of Hamas.
All right, so let's talk about what's going on right now with this peace proposal that has been adopted by both Israel and Hamas. President Trump, I think, was in Israel and spoke before the Knesset, I think, on Monday, earlier this week. And, this plan, 20-point plan, popped up sort of out of nowhere, out of the blue about 2 weeks ago or so. And then we find out about a week ago, over the last weekend, that both Israel and Hamas adopted this peace plan that was initiated by the White House. I would be curious to know, why did Israel accept this peace plan, and why Hamas also accepted this peace plan? What's going on here?
The reasons that are, of course, are different. For Israel, there is a lot of skepticism about this plan. Many Israelis think that there is a high likelihood it won't succeed. However, the main feeling in Israel was that our main hindrance from finishing Hamas was the fact that they had our hostages, especially the live ones. So the moment that President Trump proposed the plan that the hostages would be freed, and the live ones immediately, for Israel, that is a definite win, because it means that if the plan fails and war resumes, then what held Israel back for almost 2 years, what the knowledge that in various areas, especially in central Gaza, which wasn't attacked really, it was attacked on the sides, but not frontally, because there were scores of hostages, and we didn't want basically to kill our guys. So the moment they are out, now the main deterrent on the Hamas side is gone. And so we feel that even if the plan fails, we have, I mean, the price of having a few weeks, even a few months of a ceasefire is worth it if we can get our hostages alive. So this is from the Israeli side. From the Hamas side, you have to understand that Hamas objectively has lost the war and is using its own population as shields. And because it is unable to fight Israel, really. There's no, the only way it stops Israel from conquering all the area is amassing 1 million people in Gaza City itself, civilians, and of course the hostages. So Israel was going very slow, like one street 1 week, going from house to house to make sure and telling people to leave and so on and so forth. This would have gone on for another year in effect. But Hamas really had two countries propping it economically and diplomatically, which are Iran and Qatar. They are the two main sources for money and also diplomatic umbrella given to it. So Iran was taken out of the picture because of the Israeli-Iran war of 12 days in June. And Qatar was basically the last remaining Hamas source of support. And basically, the President Trump's pushing on Qatar and saying, this is the so-called money time. Now, either you accept my plan, I mean, you make Hamas accept my plan, or I tell Israel, okay, go in and do whatever, and we will protect you in the international institutions they are already calling what we are doing a genocide, but it will, of course, become harder because we will have to kill more people to invade Gaza City itself. So basically, these two were the reasons why Hamas and Israel accepted. Hamas, I think, still wants to basically try to wiggle out or to extend it or to find some way to keep some part in power in Gaza. I think he won't succeed, but we have to understand that the third party in this accord is the US. And basically, what President Trump did, he fused together these accords with Gaza with the Abraham Accords. Basically, he said to the Arab countries that are part of the Abraham Accords, I want you to be on board with this, because the war in Gaza will destroy the Abraham Accords. It will create so much resentment in the Arab street eventually that we won't be able to do it. So together with the US and the other Arab countries, they pushed on Qatar. And so in this way, having in a way the stick and the carrot, saying the stick is, I will, if you don't agree, Hamas will become totally isolated, and the carrot is that within the Abraham Accords there can be a rebuilding of Gaza, of course without Hamas, but still a rebuilding of Gaza, which for many Arab countries would be the right answer for the war, for their population, for the Arab street to say, yeah, we are now helping to rebuild Gaza. Of course, the question remains if we succeed in pushing Hamas out of power.
Interesting strategy on the part of the White House. You certainly opened my eyes to a new dimension, which I did not actually see. I haven't seen in the media. So the way I understand it, and I think everybody that's watching us understands now, it was important for the United States to put pressure not only on Israel but especially on the sponsors, the people behind Hamas, the countries that were helping Hamas. First, it was Iran, of course, for many, many years, and then Qatar as well for many, many years. And just like you said, in June,
also Turkey, Turkey too, but Qatar was the main funder and the point is that the Hamas leadership that is not in Gaza lives in Qatar, and so basically, if Qatar tells them go away, they have a problem. Not many places will accept them.
So you've got a smart guy in the White House who is on good terms with Erdogan in Turkey. Of course,
Exactly.
helps Israel slam real hard Iran in towards the end of June of this year, and
Yes.
then you've
Yes.
got putting pressure on Qatar, which has good relationships with the United States, economic, political, diplomatic relationships, and so the United States said, "Wait a second, we need to stop all of this help that's going inside Gaza and helping Hamas." And that way we choke them off, and so hopefully we get this arrangement, this plan adopted by both sides. You did mention a couple of times the Abrahamic Accords, which of course take us back to the first mandate of President Trump. So if you don't mind, for those of us, for those not of us, but for those who are younger or have forgotten, give us a brief synopsis about the Abrahamic Accords, how they came about. In my opinion, it was an outstanding diplomatic achievement by the Trump administration, 7, 8 years ago. So tell us about those accords, and then we'll move on. We'll get back to Gaza.
So first of all, I want to object to your saying younger people because I think that you and I are young still. But
Thank you.
to the point of the question, basically, the Abraham Accords are the idea that the situation in the Middle East is better served by trying to get to solve the various conflicts, the Israeli-Arab conflict, but not only other conflicts that are going on, by creating economic cooperation and economic interdependence and growth. And then at that point, the actual military and diplomatic struggles would become relatively less important, and because the countries that are involved will have more to lose. Because of course, if Arabs and Israelis have no economic contacts, so and the only contact is war, is very different than if they are mutual economic ties and commerce and developments and companies and so on. So the idea basically was a bit like the European Union in the sense that it started, after the Second World War with a lot of mistrust. The idea is good economic relations create trust. So the Abraham
Right,
Accords were based on two pillars. One was to create an initiative of Arab countries recognizing Israel, and then have a regional structure of economic development with the Gulf states, Israel, America, and other Arab countries together, trying to work together in a way that is of mutual benefit. So this is one pillar. The other pillar was that this coalition, if you want, this Abrahamic coalition, would push away the radical groups and countries and parties. So it was supposed basically to say this is a coalition of moderates, and so it is anti-ISIS and also anti-Iran and also anti-Hamas. And so it would, in a way, create a kind of moderate center in in the Arab world, if you want, that would push the basically the Iranian axis and all the countries aligned with it towards. I mean, it would make him weaker, and some of them would consider maybe joining the accords. Basically, again, having a stick and a carrot. Now, remember that on the first round of Abraham Accord, the the Iranian camp was far stronger because Iran at that time had Syria as a vassal, and it had the ruling party in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and in Iraq were aligned with Iran. So, in fact, Iran was far more powerful, and so many Arab countries, mainly Egypt, Saudi, and the Gulf, were far more afraid of Iranian influence growing, and so they were convinced to come on board. Now, on this second round, actually, the Iranian axis is far weaker.
yeah,
Some of it is
collapsed.
unconnected with Israel because in Iraq things change, and now Iraq is not aligned with. It's not very Western friendly, but it's not aligned with Iraq anymore. So it's more. Sorry, Iraq is not aligned with Iran anymore. It's more, independent policy. And then because of the war with Hamas, the unintended consequences, as we know, sometimes uh, things happen that you don't expect. And what happened is that not only Iran was military, its nuclear program, sorry, was hit, but its two main proxies, Syria and Lebanon, one collapsed totally, meaning the Assad regime has been replaced. The replacement is not very nice people, but they are not Iranian proxies. And in Lebanon, Hezbollah is still surviving, but is far, it's like isolated and far weaker than it was. So in theory, now the Abraham Accords could have Lebanon joining, and there's also talk about countries that are Muslim but not Arab, like Indonesia, that would so the market possibilities, the economic possibilities, because Indonesia is a very large country with a large economy and a large population,
Right.
would would entice basically population and countries to join. So basically, it can say, we can see it as Abraham Accords 2.0. And so basically, Trump put the Gaza Accords
In
like
the
a
context.
Lego brick. He put it right into the Abraham Accords, hoping that it would entice again countries like Turkey and Qatar that are not very friendly to Israel to make the calculation that it's worthwhile for them to be in rather than out. Because with President Trump, it's very clear that if you're out, then you might get in trouble with him. So, in
There
many
might be
cases,
consequences.
exactly. And so, for in the past, other administrations would say, okay, if you're with us, good, but if not, no problem. But Trump's attitude is a bit different. You better be with me. Whoever is not with me might have a problem. Consequences, as
Might
you
have a
say.
problem. Indeed, an amazing strategy how the White House, Mr. Trump in this case, built upon his past accomplishments and achievements. I can tell you who would have thought 6, 7, 8 years ago when the Abrahamic Accords were signed that anything like that would have been possible. And lo and behold, this person in the White House, out of the blue, was able to accomplish this magnificent, I think, accomplishment for the Middle East. And of course, the Abrahamic Accords derive their name from the fact that the Muslims, of course, claim Abraham as one of their spiritual forefathers. Of course, Israel has its roots in Abraham, and Christians also claim spiritual affinity to Abraham and his descendants as well. Folks, we are having a very interesting conversation with Ofir Halvry from the Herzl Institute in Jerusalem. A conversation uh, that's filled with a lot of information, a lot of details, useful historical, geopolitical, strategic, a lot of useful information if you want to get educated on the Middle East and what's going on there right now. Uh, so there has been the 20-point plan by Mr. Trump has been accepted, at least in theory, by both Hamas and Israel. The I think the last hostages have come home, and now we are reading in the press. Actually, I was going to the media, I mean to the press through the headlines today, and I'm reading that Hamas is trying to reassert itself militarily and politically in Gaza. And what do you see? We are seeing public executions in the newspapers. We are seeing armed conflicts between different rival Palestinian groups in Gaza. What should we read in this regard? What do you expect over the next couple of weeks or months to happen in
Well,
Gaza?
basically, Hamas executing people in on the street. What's new? That's Hamas.
Right.
So the question really is this: the ceasefire is based on some assumptions about the future. Now, this might come true or not. the day the ceasefire went
Effect.
into action, let's say, Hamas basically immediately tried to reassert its control on as much of Gaza as it can. So, one, various groups that try to create some kind of autonomy, either based on clan or local activities, where are being gunned down by Hamas. But not only that, even people who are like journalists or people who are like human rights activists are being hounded and in many cases executed by Hamas. Now, this is the way that Hamas rules Gaza, has ruled Gaza for 20 years. They are a very violent, and they have no qualms about not only about killing people, but they kill people in the street and they film it because their
Right.
point, right? It's not, they're not saying
Oh,
we have had a trial exactly, and they don't say we had a trial and these three people were indicted and they were
found
executed,
guilty.
but they bring them in the street. You don't see any trial. Someone says these people are traitors, and they shoot them. Who they are, why they are they the right people, the wrong people? What's the reason? Who knows? But the point for Hamas is to terrorize, first of all, its own population. They want to have the fear return into the Gaza population from Hamas, because the way they rule Gaza is by terror, not by free elections and free society. So this is nothing new, basically, for Hamas. To anyone who knows Hamas, it was clear that this would be the screenplay that would be played out. Now, the main issue is, of course, that the ceasefire is predicated on Hamas giving up its arms and its
Right.
political power.
I'm sorry.
Now,
Yep.
exactly. Now, this can be achieved in three ways. One, Hamas willingly giving up its power. I'm rather skeptic. Another possibility is for some kind of international force made
Right.
up mainly of Arabs. So let's say Arab soldiers from Egypt and Morocco and Saudi or whatever, doesn't matter, comes and reestablishes order and reestablishes some kind of non-Hamas rule. It can be some kind of interim organization until there are elections. It might there might be an attempt to impose some kind of rule by the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, having some people there. It's unclear, but this would mean that this international force, these soldiers, would have to fight Hamas, right, and eject it from power. Now, I am very skeptical about that. That would happen because I don't see I would say this: these Arab soldiers would be accused by their own populations and by leftists in Europe and America, saying you're doing Israel's dirty job. So I'm skeptic that they will do this. The Turks and the Qataris are confident that they can convince Hamas to give up its power and its arms. I'm skeptical, but we will see. But if these two things don't play out, either Hamas is forced by an international force to give up, or it willingly gives up. The third option is, of course, that the conditions for the ceasefire are not being fulfilled, and then Israel will resume the war. So these are the three possibilities, because there is zero possibility, as I understand it, that Israel, or by the way, President Trump, or by the way, all the signatories of the ceasefire will accept that Hamas will remain in power. Because that ceasefire was signed not only by Israel, it was signed by, I think, 15 or 20 countries. So you had people coming from Egypt and from Turkey and from Europe, right? You had that photo op on right on in Sharon. All these countries that were there, Arab countries and European countries and the US. Why were they there? Because they said we are signatories to these accords. Basically, we are the guarantees that Israel will not invade and that Hamas will give up its power. Now, if that condition is not met, Israel will come to the US and say, okay, either you disarm Hamas or we do it. But someone has to disarm Hamas because we are unwilling to have a rerun of what happened in 2 years ago in another 2 or 4 or 5 years or whatever. So again, I'm not a prophet. I don't know what will happen, but these are the only three possibilities. One, Hamas willingly gives up its power. I'm skeptical. Who knows? Two, it will be forced to do it by some kind of international coalition. Three, it will be done by Israel, unfortunately. So the war would resume. That is the option we don't prefer. We don't want it because people on our side will die and there will be international pressure. But maybe that's unavoidable.
Folks, once again, a very interesting conversation with Ofir Halvry from the Herzl Institute in Jerusalem. Things and points of view that you will not find in the regular media. Thank you again for being with us. We still have a number of very interesting topics that have not been discussed in the media in the last months, maybe a year or 2 years, and we'll get details from our guest tonight. Still speaking of Hamas, uh, the last option that you presented, that you put sort of on the table, if Hamas does not abide by reason or by pressure from the United States, the Arab states, Israel might move in. Let me tell you why I am a little bit skeptical about that. Not in the sense that Israel is not going to go in. I hope Israel will go in and deal with this situation. The problem I am foreseeing is the problem that we have all suspected from the beginning, and that is Hamas, in a sense, is a bunch of chickens. You go in, try to fight them, and they hide in hospitals, they hide in civic centers. They don't abide by the rules of war. You talked about the Geneva Convention earlier today. For those of you folks who do not know what the Geneva Convention is, back in the 50s, the Geneva Convention, I think there were two Geneva Conventions, one dealing with prisoners and the other one with the rules of war, where you cannot hide behind civilians, you cannot hide in churches, you cannot hide in mosques, you cannot hide in civic centers, you cannot hide in hospitals and fight your enemies from those establishments. It's against the rules of war. Of course, that applies to regular armies and states, and in this case, Hamas, I guess, claims not to be a state actor on a state, and therefore they can do that. But again, please address this point for us with respect to the past and what we can expect for the future. I think that one of the things that prolonged this war is precisely the fact that Hamas did exactly this. They hid in hospitals, they hid in civic centers, where it was very difficult for Israel to pursue these terrorists. What's your take on that?
Well, my take is one. You are correct. In fact, I can think of one article of the Geneva Convention that actually Hamas has abided for. So virtually everything that you mentioned. So keeping civil institutions out of fighting and not making them into military terrorist camps, like schools,
Battlefields.
like hospitals, all of that, of course. No, it's not only that, you might say, during fighting, some soldiers are retreating and they enter an hospital. That is not the case at all. What I mean is that Hamas built missile launchers and terror tunnels underneath the hospital and the schools on purpose. Meaning, to begin with, it's not that during the battle extends to a hospital or something like that. It's on purpose. All the military structure of Hamas, it's built under civilian institutions. One. Secondly, they never abide by the basic rules of war. Meaning, someone has mentioned, I think, that Hamas is the only army or military organization in the world that fights in civilian clothes and puts on military clothes only when the fighting is over. So now there's a ceasefire. You see all the Hamas soldiers parading on the streets. But while the fighting was on, they fought in civilian clothes. Sometimes they had like the jacket with press on it, or the
Right.
jacket with red crescent. So basically, their strategy is for all the fighters never be in military fatigues, because one, you make the Israeli soldier think twice or three times. Wait a minute, am I shooting at a civilian or not? And secondly, if they are shot, they're terrorists. They can show here Israel is shooting civilians. So during the war, all during the war, you saw that all the Hamas soldiers never wore uniforms, which is a basic requirement of the law of war in order to differentiate between fighters and non-fighters. But if all the Hamasniks are wearing civilian clothes, then obviously you cannot really. And sometimes, unfortunately, this means that more civilians are killed by Israeli fire, because we see someone moving, he has something in his hand. A soldier doesn't know, is it a broom or right, or a rifle? You cannot know. So at night, how can you know what's going on? So this is not a side result. This is a strategy of Hamas. The same with holding civilian hostages. Not only that, not only they took 250 hostages from Israel, the vast majority of them civilians, including little children, including underage youth, including women, including old people, but
Disabled on the
the,
age.
no, and
Disabled on the age.
more than that. So even those that they held, they refused to have the Red Cross visit any of them. So
Incredible.
not only they keep civilians, right? They for
That,
two
that's
years,
another
all these
violation of
people that they held,
international law.
they, so you have like I give you one example. Some of the hostages, right, were killed by them after they were caught, right? Some of them are not even Jewish or Israeli. There were a few students from Africa and from Nepal that came to Israel, right, to study agriculture. They were caught and they were killed. Sometimes the Hamas people, they filmed themselves beheading a Filipino worker, right? So these people were not Israelis, not soldiers, not anything. Just it's right, and you have these people killing those civilians, and those who were kept for 2 years never saw anyone from the Red Cross, never saw anything like that. So this is this is simply outside of every rule that we can understand. And I can go on and on, but there's no point, because at this point you understand that these people are simply a band of butchers. That, by the way, I can tell you that their butchering of their own population is not
Yes,
less violent, right? So people that they don't like, they don't even shoot someone in a basement. They take him to the top floor and they throw him from the building, because their goal is to everyone to see, right, that we are so cruel that you better not try to speak against us or do anything against us. So basically, Israel had to fight in a way with one hand tied behind its hand. One,
that's
because
right.
the other side fights dirty, and secondly, because even if we know it fights dirty, we cannot fight in the same way for two reasons. One, we are not interested in having an we could say, let's just carpet bomb all of Gaza. We can do that. 250,000 people dead in 1 week, finished. We could do
That's
that
right.
technically. We have the capability. But one, morally, we are not interested in doing that. And secondly, of course, there were our own hostages. We would have killed them. So these two reasons basically were the two main strong points, if you want, of Hamas, using the hostages and their own population as human shields. But you have to remember that now that won't be the case, because now in this perimeter where all the Hamas forces are held, there are no more living Israeli hostages, and moreover, it is possible for Israel to say all the civilians have, let's say, 1 week to leave to other areas. like in other places that Israel conquered, we use that technique. Basically, we go to a town and we say we are going to enter this town. All the civilians, please leave through these crossings, and then we can attack the terrorists that remain in the town. Of course, it means that the town is totally destroyed because we have to go again. We have to go house to house because many times the missiles and the tunnels end up in civilian houses. So in order to clean up the area, you have to work in a way that is very destructive. But that is feasible for us. Of course, some Israeli soldiers will die and so on. But now that we don't have the hostages anymore in their hands, the living ones at least, and we have other areas of Gaza that we still control because in the Gaza Strip now about 40% is the area where Hamas is, and about 60% is still controlled by Israel around it. So we can tell if the war resumes, we can tell the civilian population of Gaza, please leave. You have 1 week to leave this area through these checkpoints. We'll check everyone that goes in order not to be terrorists, but you can go and into an area that is managed by humanitarian organization, and then we'll be able to strike, which will mean basically the total destruction of Gaza City, right? It will become rubble, but that will be the natural um, result from the Hamas tactics.
Yeah, unfortunately, let's hope that we are not going to get to that scenario. No doubt, Hamas is made up of bad boys. They have proven that over and over again. One of the things that I have learned, and it's not really been publicized a lot in the West, but one of the things that I have learned about this so-called Gaza blockade and the humanitarian aid that was trickling in is that Hamas was hijacking convoys of humanitarian aid brought in from the United States, NGOs, the United Nations, and was using humanitarian aid as a political weapon or as a weapon against the Palestinian population. What can you tell us
Yes,
about that?
basically because Hamas is a terrorist organization that controls its own population. Not talking about Israel, talking about its own population. It controls them by terror, by fear, by control of all resources. So basically, exactly the point is that if the civilian population in Gaza can access food and other resources independently of Hamas, Hamas loses its hold on them when it controls the food. So the case was that all UN and other aid was going through places where Hamas controlled. So you can say you get it, you don't get it. Uh, of course, the best food goes to our fighters and so on and so forth. Now, the moment that there was offered an alternative to that, for Hamas, it meant losing at least part of his power, maybe a lot of his power, because when the Gaza Strip is in war, then the food becomes uh, one of the only vital resources. So in I would say in more regular times, Hamas also controlled, for instance, the job market. It can tell who gets work and who doesn't, and it controlled the aid from UNRWA, not only food but other types of aid. During the war, basically, the most important thing, of course, is food in order to
Food,
survive. So
right?
control of it became vital, and so it started methodically to kill people who were going to food distribution centers that were not controlled by Hamas, sending its own terrorists dressed as civilians, of course, to terrorize that area in order to prevent, I would say, alternative centers of power in Gaza.
Speaking of humanitarian aid, and since we are having this discussion on a Christian platform originating out of Romania, we would like to know to what extent Christian NGOs have been involved in providing assistance to Israel and also assistance to the Palestinians. I spent the first half of this year in the United States, and I watched TBN, Trinity Broadcast Network, uh, regularly, almost every day back in the United States. And there were a lot of shows and programs in the United States about, gathering support for Israel in terms of food and assistance. And of course, the media focuses attention on this flotilla coming from Europe once in a while, taking, food assistance to Gaza. What about Christian nonprofit organizations? I know that the Samaritan's Purse out of, I think, the state of North Carolina or Virginia was involved quite a bit, even in Gaza, with assistance. What did Christians from outside of Israel do to help with
So
to assist with humanitarian assistance?
So basically, we have to divide it. The Christian assistance to Israel is one area, one issue that it has been very substantial. Of course, there has been aid in various forms that are gone to Israel, but even more, I would say, moving has been that, especially in the first months, uh, there were areas in Israel, in the south of Israel, that were virtually depopulated because of what happened on the attack, and many of the people who let's say did the various let's say agricultural jobs were of course drafted into the army to fighting. So a lot of for one example is that a lot of workforce in let's say someone has a field of I don't know aubergines, and now is the time to to have to have them bring bringing in the harvest, and that there are no workers because the workers have been drafted into the army, or
The
some
army.
foreign workers that were coming from, let's say, from Thailand or Philippines, left Israel because you know that some of the workers that were working near Gaza were murdered by Hamas. So the other workers, it's very natural. They got very frightened and they left, and it took time. There, so a lot of Israelis were saying, "Wait a minute, all the food in the fields will rot because there's no one to cut them." So there were groups of Christians from America and Europe that came for 1 week. Each group came for 1 week and helped with harvesting all these products, and also helping things like you had a lot of food coming in, let's say from donations in Israel and outside. But then, let's say that you have a whole place full of food, but still you have to package it in order to send it either to families, because there were, I would say, 250,000 Israelis that left their homes and went to live elsewhere in the first months, because in the south and also in the north, because there was fear of attack and invasion by Hezbollah. So the population in the towns on the northern border, all the civilian population was asked to move to areas farther from the border. So they went to live in camps, in hotels, and so of course many of them didn't have clothes, didn't have food, just left their houses. And even more in the south, people whose villages was attacked. So you had Christian organizations. One very famous one is called the Friendship Organization. There are others, but and helping, especially it was especially evident at the beginning of the war, where everything was very disordered. So Israel had to organize both the counterattack against Hamas and all these hundreds of thousands of people moving from their homes. And even if the food was there, still you have to package it and to deliver it. And so you need all these logistics out of nothing. It's not, it's not a population that was already receiving aid and then just continue to give the packages. It was from 0 to 100. So people that came and helped with that was fantastic with the Christian organization. With Gaza, it's a bit different, because in Gaza, as I said, the problem is that all the aid organizations basically had to go through Hamas. This is until I would say 9 months ago or something like that, when in substantial areas of the Gaza Strip became controlled by Israel, and then it became possible in those areas to have aid entering that is not controlled by Hamas. So basically, the U.S. I would say encouraged the creation of the it's called the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, and it was actually its executive chairman is named Johnny Moore. He's a famous American evangelical leader and businessman, and he basically coordinated aid from various Christian organizations into the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, and established some camps in the Gaza Strip, an area not controlled by uh, by Hamas, where there was distribution of food that was independent. And of course, in the media, there was a whole, I would say, campaign against the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation because it is not controlled by Hamas, and it was described as unruled. I mean, the areas always there were reports on people being shot there, but actually, the people being shot were being shot by Hamas terrorists that didn't want these activities going on because it meant that the Hamas power was being restricted. So
Yeah,
I would
issue
say that,
loyalty.
yeah, most of the independent aid that was given to the Gaza Strip by a Christian organization was through this umbrella organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. And unfortunately, other Christian organizations that want to help the areas in Gaza that are ruled by Hamas have to go through Hamas. And then you don't know really what happens and who gets what and so on. But that is the situation.
Still on the topic of Christians in Gaza and Israel, what about the Christians, the Arab Christians in Gaza? How did they? We didn't get hardly any news about them in the Western media. What about them? How did they fare during these 2 years of conflict?
So, look, I would have to say that there was once a substantial Christian population in Gaza, once upon a time. But as in many other areas in the Middle East, except for Israel, Israel is the only place in the Middle East where the Christian population is stable and even growing. And unfortunately, in all the Arab countries, in all the Arab areas, and including the Gaza Strip, the Christian population is diminishing for
Yep,
various reasons. And so I would say that today there are maybe 200 to 300 Christians in Gaza, really remaining,
that's all that's
and
left.
most of them are, yes, most of them are either elderly people or some priests that keep some old church going. But really, look, the point is that a very large percentage of the Gaza population anyway wants to leave. It's a very poor place and it's governed by terrorists. Again, nothing to do with Israel. This is the objective situation of Gaza. So usually Christians have an easier way out. So basically, all of the Christians that wanted to leave left, and those who remained are either elderly or those taking care of them, or people who are staying because if someone is a priest in a church, even if there are only 3 people remaining there, you won't leave them. So the population is very, very tiny, and also because they are so tiny and under Hamas control, they are they have to be very, very, very careful about what they say. So Hamas, from time to time, also publicizes some kind of you know um, like fake news. For example, there is an old church in Gaza, and next to it there is some kind of community center. And during the first months of the battle in Gaza, the community center, there was no one in it, but it was hit. The roof was hit and it was damaged. So, of course, Hamas distributed all over the world pictures of the church saying that Israel bombed this church. In fact, the church was unharmed, and the community center, no one was there. And unfortunately, in a war, that might happen because people forget that even some Israeli soldiers are being killed by friendly fire. That unfortunately, in a war, if you shoot hundreds and hundreds of shells, some might fall somewhere. But the point is that you had all these propaganda, fake propaganda by Hamas, finding the few places where there are Christians and trying to, in a way, to inflame Western public opinion on that. Whereas, in fact, the main problem for Christians in the Gaza Strip for the last 30 years have been Hamas and nothing else.
Amazing, folks. I think you have noticed that our guest for tonight, Ofir Halvry from the Herzl Institute, is indeed a walking encyclopedia when it comes to the Middle East, Israel, and so on and so forth. And he touched on a topic that's close to my heart. We are not going to discuss it tonight, maybe on a different occasion, and that is the slow but steady disappearance of the Christian population in the Middle East, starting in Afghanistan, what's left of it, Iraq, and Egypt, and so on, Syria, and so on and so forth. But that's for another day. We are nearing the end of this conversation, but I still have, I can tell you folks, I've got a whole bunch of other topics that I'd like to discuss with our friend tonight. We don't have the time, but of the many topics that I still have on my list, and the list is long, folks. The list is long. I want to talk about, let's go back 2 years ago or so, or a year and a half ago, when South Africa sued Israel before the World Court in The Hague for genocide and crimes against humanity, so on and so forth. Number one, tell us about the latest, if you have any details about the latest concerning that case. I think it's still on the docket, has not been yet a decision issued. Number two, we have the International Criminal Court, which has gone awry, has gone in the wrong direction for many years, and now they have, I think, indicted and issued a warrant for the Prime Minister's arrest, Netanyahu, in Israel, on the one hand. And then the second question is going to be Hamas. Has anyone filed in the World Court anything against Hamas? Because obviously what happened on October the 7th was a targeted attack, genocidal in my opinion, because it targeted Israelis precisely because of their origin, because of their ethnicity. Or has the International Criminal Court issued any arrest warrants for any of the Hamas terrorists?
Well, this is a very complex subject, but let's start with this. One, the Hague court, not the criminal court, the other court, cannot deal with non-state agents. So on that side, there is no. I mean, Hamas cannot be brought before. Cannot be because it's not a country. So that court only deals with countries, with governments, and not with individuals or organizations. Although Hamas is de facto the government of the Gaza Strip for 20 years, it's not formally a country, so it cannot be dealt with there. In the ICC, in fact, what has happened is that there has been an indictment of, I think, let's say 8 or 10 people, and they have used this technique of having 5 Israelis and 5 Hamas, or 4, I don't remember the number. But the point is that it's irrelevant. Why? Because the list of Hamas people that they indicted are all dead. So they
No,
indicted Sinwar and all these guys, but they're all dead. So they indicted them, but there's no real meaning to the indictment because they're dead. And on the Israeli side, they indicted Netanyahu, and Gallant was the defense minister at the time, and so on and so forth. So they created a system where you indict someone who's dead, so it doesn't matter you find him culpable or not. It has no meaning. You do not need to issue anything because the guy has been dead for I don't know 6 months or 1 year or whatever. So this is one part of the criminal court. Now if you want the genocide case, I have to say that it's a very problematic issue because according to the actual criteria of accepted criteria of a genocide, there is no question that Israel has not engaged in any kind of acts that can be defined as genocidal. For that
agree.
reason, there is an attempt to change the definitions in order to find some way of indicting Israel because the definitions are not actually on there. And because the court is made of countries, so the judges are sitting there represent the various countries. So and the court changes the composition changes every 6 months or every year. I don't remember exactly. There is some kind of change in the judges. So in fact, uh, because most countries in the world are not very nice countries, so you always have an inbuilt majority that is, to say the least, not very favorable to Israel. You might have judges from Sudan and from South Africa and from North Korea and from Iran
Libya,
judging Israel, right? Libya,
right.
China, so on and so forth. So Pakistan, whatever, you get the idea. So this is one problem, that how can we even have a fair judgment where I give you one example. In the UN, there are two forums for the decisions. There is the Security Council, where there are 15 members that are changing, five are always there, but 10 are changing, and there is a veto. So there can be a veto on decisions. The General Assembly, all the countries are members there, all of them vote, but the decisions have no actual, they cannot be acted upon. So people don't know that, but in the last, let's say, 10 years, Israel has been condemned in the UN General Assembly more times than Iran, China, Russia, North Korea put together. So, as you can see, it's very easy to always condemn it, right? Because you have an inbuilt majority of Muslim countries and some satellites and some countries like China and Russia and so on, and it's inbuilt to be anti-Israel. So basically, we have an objective problem with these organizations, where my own view is that uh, instead of the UN, there should be some kind of similar organization only of democratic countries. Because if there are only democratic countries, I can say I can expect at least some kind of serious judgment where there is some kind of public discussion on it, and the government can change and so on. If there are dictatorships, what's the point, right? I mean, it's like saying that uh, Romania, when it was ruled by communism, Ceausescu would appoint someone as the judge. Would we, as Israeli, expect that judge to be fair? Do we expect the Chinese judge to be fair with us, or is getting his bosses in Beijing saying you should decide this way or that way, and that's it? So that is a real basic problem. But I think that the most important thing is for everyone to recognize that the basic conditions to define what is happening in Gaza as a genocide are simply not there. not in the intention, not in what is happening, and not in the numbers. What do I mean? One, for sure, Israel was attacked by Hamas to begin with. Secondly, Israel, through the war, has showed many times it has made every conceivable effort to minimize civilian casualties. So there are hundreds of films showing the Israeli army announcing to the civilians in an area, "We are going to bomb this area tomorrow. Please leave." Right? So in these cases, we always lose the element of surprise. We are endangering our own troops because we refuse to say, let's just bomb all these areas indiscriminately. Now, even indiscriminate bombing is not genocide, but we're not even doing that. And objectively, I'm saying that the Hamas Ministry of Health is saying that there are 65,000 dead in Gaza in the last 2 years. Now you have to understand that this number includes one. Every year, every year, 10,000 people die of natural causes in Gaza. I mean, that's the rate of people dying in a population of 2 million. So it means that out of 65,000, 20,000 are not dead because of the war. They are dead anyway because they would have died anyway. So we are 45,000 people. Now, out of these 45, the majority are men of fighting age. So obviously, there are civilian casualties. I'm not saying there aren't, but clearly, when the majority of people killed are men of fighting age, then you have to acknowledge this is not a genocide, it's a war. War is not a nice thing. It's not a game, it's not a video game. People die, unfortunately, but it lacks any definition of genocide, not in the intent of severely depleting a population, not in the intent of killing a large part of a population, not in the intent of killing mainly civilians, nothing like that. Most of the dead in the war are Gazan males of fighting age. Now, you should even see sometimes, you will see in the media people using the number, there are 20,000 children killed in Gaza. Now, I'll give you one example. This number is totally fake. Why? One, it includes children and young people who died of natural causes, because unfortunately, some people die in cancer and other, right, even at childbirth. Secondly, Hamas brings into its forces people who are 17, 16, even 15 years old. So when someone is shooting at you and you shoot back, you cannot know if it's 15 or it's 18 or it's 20. You might shoot someone and then they say, oh, you killed a kid of 16. But in fact, he was a fighter. We don't like it, but it's so. So in this way, all these claims of genocide are simply proved to be totally false. A friend of mine is doing now a study because of the ceasefire, we can study the numbers more deeply, and he's going. I hope very soon he's going to show exactly how even if we account that the numbers published by the Hamas Ministry of Health, even when you take the DAF numbers, and I am skeptical about them, but let's assume for a moment that these numbers, we use them, even according to that number, there is absolutely no genocide, and most of the dead in the war are people who were fighting.
My friend Ofir, we have two more topics that I would like to touch with you. They are sort of light. Folks, you have seen a very energetic Israeli on the screen with us for almost 2 hours. My friend, you've got a great deal of energy, more energy than the young people that I work with at the office. Congratulations. Two more topics, sort of light-hearted. I have given a title to our discussion tonight. Let me find it on page 1 of my notes. Surrounded by enemies and forever standing. Israel after 2 years of siege. And in our communications by email concerning the topic and our discussion tonight, you came up with a very interesting phrase from the book of Numbers in the Torah or in the Old Testament for us Christians. And you gave me the following quote. It says, a people that shall dwell alone. Fascinating excerpt from the book of Numbers. Why that excerpt? What does that mean in connection with our conversation tonight?
I'll tell you, that passage is from, if you look at the broader chapter, that is from the story of a local Canaanite king who sees the host of Israel about to enter the land of Israel, and he brings the king is named Balak, and he brings a prophet named Bilam to curse the
Right,
Israelites. So this prophet, who's a true prophet, in the sense that he says, "I will pray to God, and whatever He tells me to say, I will say it." And then God makes him all the curses as are in fact benedictions. And
blessing.
so, of course, this king says, "What are you doing? I brought you to curse them, and you're blessing them." And he says, "What can I say? I cannot do. I cannot say something against what God says, right?" So,
Right,
and people say, "What does it mean? People that stand alone." You can say, "This is a blessing" or "This is a curse." This is a description of being different than other nations in our, unfortunately, in our, or fortunately, again, depends on how you look at it, but in our destiny is in many cases, of course, in the Bible and in ancient history, but even in modern history, after all, we are the only Jewish state where we have many Muslim, Christian, Hindu, whatever, and we are very small. Sometimes Israel said, "Why couldn't the promised land? Why couldn't it be, let's say, in some island, where there's no one? I don't know, Greenland or something like that." It would have been, but unfortunately, we are at the intersection of great civilizations and always have been challenged by them, and has been in a way our destiny to challenge all kind of I would say prevailing evil empires that it was in the case of the ancient Israel with the Babylonians and the Egyptians. Of course, everyone knows the story of the Exodus and so on. And in the modern times, the fact that Israel had to stand both against Arab pan-nationalism, now Islamism, and also for 2 generations, the communist bloc was against us. And fortunately, I use this quote to say that fortunately we stand alone, but not really alone, because at all times we have also had friends, and today also we have friends. Sometimes these friends are a country, sometimes they're individuals, sometimes they're organizations, but we really feel them. And people know, a lot of people don't know really the history of Israel, and they tend to think, for instance, that Israel was supported by America from day one, and they're being allies for 75 years. That's not true. In fact, Harry Truman did support the creation of the State of Israel. But in the 50s and early 60s, actually, America, it wasn't anti-Israel, but there was no aid and there was no special relationship and anything like that. At that time, actually, Israel was a close ally. It's hard to believe today, but actually of France. And the way it became close to the America, it was a gradual process of Americans getting to know Israel and feeling that this society shares values with them, and so it's worthwhile to be allied on. Before we enter into various geopolitical, military, strategic considerations, there is some kind of closeness of values or of proximity of values, and that is, I think, we can have a whole discussion about the strategic reasons for Israel and the U.S. or European countries to be allied. But basically, I think that the case for Israel, for so many people around the world, especially in Europe and America, the reason why they feel an affinity for Israel is that they feel one on one side a kind of shared past because we both share our biblical grounding. I mean, our vision of the world is based on the Bible. We see the world as a battle between good and evil, between immorality and morality. That is the way we understand the world, and it's not. That's not the case everywhere. China doesn't see the world in that way. It's not. In many countries don't look at the world in that way. This is one. And secondly, in current terms for the present and the future. So I think that so many people, especially Christians in Europe and America, every time I go to a meeting in London, where I met you a few 2 months ago, I think, or 1 month ago, or Paris or Rome or Budapest or wherever I go, I didn't visit Romania yet, but I hope to be there. In many cases, I'm coming and I'm talking. I'm expecting people to discuss issues on a kind of natural interest level, but then people come to me and say that their feeling of connection with Israel is not only the commerce, strategic, and so on, but also on a kind of moral and spiritual level, that they feel that Israel is not only a civilization that is akin to their civilization, but is also the front line of fighting for Western values. And basically, Israel is we are at volume 10 in the battle against the jihadis and all these groups, and it's not a coincidence that not only the Islamists, but also all the left, crazy, woke, trans agenda is also so much against Israel. You ask yourself, why is it that Islamic fundamentalists and all this trans LGBTQ agenda, how are they together? They hate each other. The only thing they agree with that they hate Israel. You say, what's the common denominator? So for me, you can agree or disagree, but for me the common denominator is clearly that these two ideologies both oppose the basic values, what we recognize as Western values. So the values of the let's say societies based on the Bible, family as based on the union between one man and one woman, and so on and so forth.
Amen.
So on the LGBTQ, it's not one man and one woman; it's two men or two women, whatever. And on the Muslim is one man and four women, whatever. But in both cases, right, they don't recognize this idea that a man should have one wife is based basically on the Bible, on Genesis, where it's clear that Adam and Eve are made from one flesh and they have to become one flesh again. One man and one woman are, in a sense, a perfect human being in this sense. And this is the basis for viewing the family and marriage in a way that Jews and Christians see it. And also, even in the West, people who weren't Christians until this generation accepted this as the way things are. And the idea that slavery is a bad thing. No other civilization in the world, not in China, not in India, not in America, not in the Muslim world, of course, no one came with the idea that slavery is bad. No one ever came with that idea. The only civilization that fought against slavery is Christian civilization. The only countries in the world that outlawed slavery, not only inside the country, but actually fought to stop slavery all around the world, it's only the Christian civilization. The only civilization that argued consistently that marriage and the family is based on one man and one woman is only the Christian and Jewish civilization. It never occurred to the Muslims, but it never occurred also to the Chinese. The Chinese, in their civilization, one man having four wives is fine. And having concubines is no problem because marriage is not a sacred thing. It's not a sacrament or a sacred union. It's just, a contract, if you want. So I'm giving you two examples. There are many, many similar ones. So I think that the affinity with Israel of the West is based on this. It's what I hear from people that come to me and talk to me in Serbia and in Brussels and in Toronto and in Florida. People, I go, I many times I give lectures about strategic things, and then people come and tell this is the basis, this is the reason Israel is on the forefront. And if Israel is defeated, we are next. And if Europe and America don't want to be next, then they have to fight for their values and support Israel fighting for for our common values.
I second that. Guys, ladies, gentlemen, folks, a fascinating conversation with an amazing man, Ofir Halvry, who after 2 hours of animated conversation, he is still standing, just like Israel, still standing after 5, 6, 10, 6,000 years, surrounded by enemies. Thank you very much for your kind
Thank
words
you.
to
Thank
us
you.
Christians about the Christian civilization, which obviously is a build-up of Judeo-Christian civilization. You talked about meeting in London a couple of months ago, or maybe 6, 7 weeks ago. I like the comment, actually comments that Rad made twice when we started the conference and when he came right at the tail end of the conversation. And he emphasized a couple of times the Judeo-Christian values which connect us Europeans Christians and the people of Israel. And I like that. That actually touched me. It was for me, one of the spiritual highlights of that conversation or that conference. And I'm glad that you brought that up. In closing, what I would like to ask you to tell us, Ophir, is tell us speak to us Christians. Look into the camera and talk to Christians today. What can we do for Israel other than praying for the peace of Jerusalem? And by the way, I attend an evangelical church, and there is not one single Sunday we practice a lot of prayer. There's not one single Sunday when I go to church and somebody does not actually pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But in addition to praying for the peace of Jerusalem, in addition to providing humanitarian assistance to the people of Israel, what else can we do to help and stand with the people of Israel? And then we are closing for today.
Okay, so in the Jewish tradition and in the Christian tradition, in order to be a good Jew or a good Christian, you have to have faith and works, right? So I believe that you are telling me that you guys have faith, and what are the works that can be done here? So I would say that
Right,
it depends very much on where everyone is, right? So I'm assuming that some of the people that hear us are living in some relatively small town, or and some in big cities, and some. So everyone can find a different way of helping. But I would say that there are two main ways. One, I would say that everyone can look around himself and see, maybe in the college he's attending, maybe at the workplace, maybe in the local elections. Anyway, there is today so much propaganda by people who hate Israel, and so
right,
many people. And although in most countries, most of the right-thinking population is actually supporting Israel, most of them are not very vocal, and they are not organized. Because 200 students in an organization can make noise in a college of 10,000 people, and you think that those 200 represent all of them, but it's not true. They represent 200, and in fact, most of the students uh, either support Israel or even don't care, but they don't support these crazy ideas. So what I'm saying is, everyone can look around himself. Where are the places where Israel is being, attacked, defamed, and try to inform himself, be a voice of support. If there is an organization that Sometimes in colleges there is an organization that supports Israel or invites Israeli speakers to the college or the town. Or there are in many places there are friendship organization. Israel Italy, Israel France, or Israel Romania. So in many towns, and such organization can have once or even once or twice a year an event of like like-minded people meeting, even in a small town, even in a large city, even in a college or a workplace, have organized. Sometimes you think, what can I do? I'm living in a small place, and but even there, sometimes you can find and find way to oppose this crazy hatred, this support for Hamas, the vocal support for Hamas. Uh, Everyone can find a way, and also um, sometimes whenever someone has the opportunity, let's say, to visit Israel, I think it's always a very good way also to inform himself, because you can come to Israel, have a good time. It's a very nice place. But also, I believe that someone that visited Israel, and even if 3 days, even better, 10 days, he went around, he saw the holy places, he saw the Kinneret, he saw Jerusalem, he saw, the places where Jesus walked, he saw modern Israel. In fact, if he encounters people later on in Romania, in London, in New York, whatever, and someone talks about Israel, he can say, you know what? I was there, and I saw that in Israel, actually, inside Israel, Muslims and Christians and Jews live together in relative harmony. It's a democracy. It's an open society. It's a prosperous society. All these crazy ideas about apartheid and genocide, it has nothing to do with reality. And instead of believing me, you can, of course, you should believe me, but what I mean is you can also come and see for yourself. And this is also always something that I believe that someone that actually visits Israel, even for a short visit of a few days, he becomes in a way an ambassador, because he can, the fact that what he saw with his own eyes is 10 times stronger than saying, I read or I heard or these guys told me. If he says, I was in Jerusalem, I was in Tel Aviv, I saw these things this way, then I can actually be a testimony that this is the case.
Seeing is believing. Thank you very much, Ofir. I would like to invite you to Romania on the record, and we'll talk about
Okay.
that off the record. You're welcome to come to Romania anytime. I would like to let you know, everybody in Israel, that you have a lot of friends in Romania. My whole family has deep respect and affectionate feelings towards Israel, and so do hundreds upon thousands of Romanian citizens. I also encourage you folks to fight anti Semitism. Anti Semitism is not a Christian value. I have said that on my Facebook page over and over again. Anti Semitism is a sin. It's not of God. It's not allowed for a Christian. Fight it off, whether in your own private thoughts or publicly when you see anti Semitic outbursts in the public square and so on and so forth. And also visit Israel to the extent you can. I have never visited Israel. My brothers have. I have not
So
made it
now,
there
now is the
yet.
time. Now there's a
Now is the
ceasefire.
time.
It's not even dangerous.
I I agree. Hopefully, I will make it there one day. Ophir, I thank you again very much for a great evening,
So
a
let me
great
tell you
conversation.
something. I think that in May of 2026, we might have a national conservative large conference in Jerusalem. And so that might be a good opportunity for you to visit.
All right. Well, hopefully, I will receive an invitation, and if so, I would absolutely would like to come. And we pray again for the peace of Jerusalem. And we are saying to you from me in Brussels and those in Romania, Shalom, good night, and may
Thank
God
you very much,
bless.
friend.
All, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.